Interesting. Well, there you go. I did enjoy that. That was good. Oh, well, I've got a review that I thought I'd go over of Darksiders as while the credits are going up. So, when I was recommended the game, I was told that it was basically like Ocarina of Time, but better. So I feel that in all of my interactions with the game, I've been comparing it to that. I have to say, overall, I disagree. Darksiders is a fun game, and in some respects it was better than Ocarina. The level design was very intelligent, well thought out, and was engaging and really gorgeous. But I don't think there are any people that wouldn't argue that the combat in Darksiders is definitely superior, being engaging and fun and varied throughout the entire game, without all the waiting around that you get in the combat in Ocarina of Time. The story in Darksiders was also really unique and interesting, but I feel that the narrative was also often quite confusing, and the exposition was really light on the ground until much later in the game. If the story had been handled better, I think it could have been a contender to Ocarina, but it falls short because of this. Where the game really falls down though is in the world design, the control scheme, and the overall difficulty curve, especially in relation to the bosses. Don't get me wrong, the game is really good looking, but the story always tells you exactly where to go next, and doesn't encourage exploration in the slightest, which in a game with such good looking and interesting world just seems like an awful shame. The small part right at the end where you're asked to explore the world to recover the Armageddon blade felt really tacked on, and overall I didn't feel engaged. I think that before that part I only checked the world map once in order to aid navigation, and never went back to it. The in-dungeon maps were so hard to read that they were worse than useless on many occasions, but this is little more than a nitpick. The control scheme was probably one of the worst parts of the game for me. I'm aware that originally the game was designed for console, and it was ported to the PC, so really it would have been better if I'd had a console controller, but the keyboard control scheme really sucked. There were buttons on there that just hindered progress and had no apparent use, like the button for making wall walk, or the one I think it was B for focusing only on one plane. It's supposed to aid strafing, but really it just almost always caused me to either die or nearly die. Some of the more astute amongst the viewers may have even noticed that I almost never used the Wrath ability during my playthrough, because in order to do that I would have had to take my hands off the main controls, and then use the Wrath and then reacquire the normal controls, which normally just cost me more health than it would have saved me. So as a result of that, I was essentially forced to not use one of the major mechanics of the game. Again, I'm not really sure it's a problem with the game, it's just a problem with the PC port. But even then, some of the controls were unresponsive, so I was pushing buttons and sometimes it just wasn't doing what I was asking it to. Finally, I do feel the difficulty curve of the game was completely wonky. Due to the upgrades and the way the character's max health develops through the game, there were several parts in the game where I had a lot of trouble with early on, whereas once I passed about the halfway point of the game, a lot of it felt too easy. And the only parts after that point that felt challenging felt unfairly so. For example, the boss I faced in order to get Ruin, the horse, was so much harder than anything that came before it, or really came after it, and if I hadn't have used the ability where I turn into like a big demon, it probably would have taken me at least 10, maybe more tries. The bosses were the most disappointing aspect of the game, as most of them felt boring and unintuitive, and generally the encounters went on too long, even including the amount of time it took me to figure out how to kill the boss. I would put an addendum on that though, that last boss was amazing. Overall, I did really enjoy Darksiders. It had some really cool and impressive elements with an immersive and beautiful world. But overall, with what I've said in mind, and also a fair number of small glitches and poor world design, I do feel disappointed. The game had a lot of potential to be something truly great, but in the end all it managed was good. With a bit more attention to detail, better bosses and world design, and making exploring something actively encouraged, and better executed story, I do think maybe the game could have rivaled my favourite game, Zelda the Ocarina of Time. So I know you may feel that I've been a bit biased towards the Ocarina of Time, which in many ways I am. it is my favourite game. But I tried my best there to be as objective as I could and compare the two games, because that's how I was presented the game when someone basically said, oh, you should play this, because they basically said it was like Ocarina of Time but better. If anyone does want to add anything constructive, feel free to comment on YouTube. I've had a lot of fun with this game. It's being an adventure game, which is my favourite type of game. I'm really glad I was able to share this with you guys. I am planning to get Darksiders 2 at some point in the future, but next up will be Tomb Raider, the reboot one that was, I think it's 2013 it came out. So that's going to be my...